Hey everyone, as always Jarek here, and welcome to a sequel that really should not have been a sequel. Red Steel 2 shares nothing with the first game. None of the protagonists, none of the music, none of the scenery. This is an entirely different game. Considering that Red Steel 1 flopped pretty bad on launch, it's a mystery why Ubisoft wanted to call this Red Steel 2. But before we get into that, I have to thank today's sponsor. Today's sponsor is NordVPN. We started this month of Wii FPS titles with a sponsor from NordVPN, and it's only fitting that we end it with another sponsor from NordVPN. I've been working a lot more with them as of late, for a few reasons. One, they're just nice to work with, they have great communication, and that's really needed with a sponsor, but more importantly, they give a product that everyone can benefit from. A VPN is a virtual private network. It encrypts your data, hides your virtual location, and hides your IP address, which is needed nowadays, especially if you're traveling and using public internet. You don't want that other person on that same public Wi-Fi network snooping around. But hey, using a VPN isn't all completely serious. There's some fun stuff you can do. By one click on a map, you can change your virtual location. That means if you wanted to watch a video that was blocked in your country, click on the map so you're living somewhere else according to the internet, and now you can watch that video. It also works with apps like Netflix and the like. There's a whole host of advantages for using NordVPN. They have over 5,200 super fast servers in 59 different countries. There's a 30-day money-back guarantee if you are not happy. There's a CyberSec suite which also acts as an ad blocker. You get even faster connection with Nord links. There is no data logging, 24/7 customer support, up to 6 simultaneous connections, and double data encryption for increased security. For NordVPN's birthday, every 2-year plan will get you 1 extra month free and a surprise gift. Go to nordvpn.com/Jarek and use code Jarek to get your special deal. As always, a huge thanks goes to NordVPN. They are truly a pleasure to work with, and this channel could not exist without sponsors like NordVPN, so again, a big thanks to NordVPN. Graphically, Ubisoft did something pretty smart. The Wii was underpowered, so there was no reason trying to make graphics like what you would see on the Xbox 360 or the PS3. So instead of taking the realism route that the first game did, they went with the cel-shaded route, and this looks a lot better. If you don't have the power to go photorealistic, you might as well go for a stylized look, and this game nails it perfectly. Now, Red Steel 1 was a good-looking game for a Wii title, and that asterisk really means that it doesn't really look very good. The Wii was just outdated. Red Steel 2, on the other hand, would be a good-looking game no matter what platform it's on. To make things even better, the aesthetics in this game are some of the most unique environments I've seen in a long time. The original Red Steel took place in modern-day LA and modern-day Japan, except through the eyes of someone that maybe watched one anime and had never been to Japan in their life. As I said before, it's like what would happen if a boomer tried to make an anime. A weeaboomer. I actually had someone genuinely leave a comment telling me that I didn't know anything about Japanese culture from that last video. You think that Red Steel is accurate to Japanese culture? I'm not dignifying that any more than I have, by God. Anyway, Red Steel 2 avoids this problem entirely by taking place in a fictional universe that's a cross between the Wild West and Japanese culture. This is such an odd mash of art styles, and somehow, some way, it works incredibly well. Aside from the fact that this is a fictional universe so you can suspend your disbelief, I don't actually know why this works well. It just does. The story is also significantly better, not that that's really anything to write home about. It's an okay story, it's just not miserable like the first game. You play as a silent protagonist that is a part of the Kusagari clan. The game opens with someone trying to murder you by dragging you behind their bike. Soon enough you find out that the entirety of your clan was wiped out and murdered. You're the last one that's left. The story is more or less figuring out who and why did this to your clan. And although the game is a little less linear than the first game, for the most part there are only 2 friendly NPCs that pass you to the next battle, which will explain more to do with the story. The towns themselves are completely empty and devoid of anyone other than enemies to slash and shoot. The story isn't great, but it's also not awful. It does its purpose perfectly fine. But that's not really the point, and it kind of doesn't matter. What's really going to be drawing your attention is just the fact that you're in an old west, but mixed with Japan environment. It's such a bizarre experience. Now we'll talk about the gameplay, and my goodness, thank God it was nothing like the first one. The first one was kind of torture to play through. I think that's it. I think that's just the end of the f***ing game. That's it. Holy f***. I'm so glad I'm done with this shit. Holy moly. The first game was basically a mediocre first-person shooter that would randomly turn into a fighting game with sword duels. Well, for Red Steel 2, gone entirely are those sword duels. I think I said in the video in Red Steel 1 that the game would be more interesting if they blend the sword combat and the gunplay together, and they did exactly that in Red Steel 2. However, my mistake coming into this game is I assumed it was going to be a first-person shooter, but that's not really what this game is. It's mostly sword combat. The best way I can describe this game is a first-person hack-and-slash game with Wiimote controls. That causes some problems, and I will definitely be getting to those, don't worry. Now, you do have some guns. The game immediately starts you out with a revolver, and eventually you can get things like, say, a double-barrel shotgun or a Thompson. Yes, a Thompson. As if this aesthetic wasn't crazy enough, there's some industrial vibes in here, too. Anyway, you can shoot enemies, but soon enough enemies are going to start getting armor, and you're going to have to rely on your sword far more than you rely on your gun. The gun is more of a complement to your sword instead of the other way around. This is where the controls come in. The game really wants to focus on the Wiimote, and you are going to be having to do full arm motions just for a single slash. If you just do this, it's a light slash. If you do this, it's a heavy slash. You're going to have one swole jerk-off arm by the time you're done beating this game. Anyway, this game requires you to use the Wii Motion Plus, which is an upgrade over the original Wiimote, but it's still going to give you a few misinputs and just no inputs, which leads to a lot of frustration. The general idea works with the limited hardware they had, though. The angle at which you are swinging your Wiimote will be the angle you were swinging your sword in-game. At least when it works. But just that on its own would be rather shallow, so there's a bit more depth to this game. You can get tons of upgrades. Some of them are very basic upgrades, like upgrading the damage your sword will do. Other ones will be entirely new moves and combos you can learn. Or perhaps you wanted to buy new guns or upgrade your guns. You can do that. Everyone can choose their own path. Typically, the way you get money is just by progressing through the story and accepting missions. Once you complete that mission, you get a certain amount of money. Just doing this is not enough to get you all the money you need for your upgrades and guns and whatever you want. Now, in order to get all the money you need to just break everything in sight, because there's money in everything. People drink alcoholic coins in this game, apparently. This gets rather annoying because you're just going to be swinging your Wiimote around constantly at everything, and ugh. It's tedious to have to break everything in every environment if you just want to get money. I know it's a small nitpick, but it's something that really does add up over the course of playing through this game. Anyway, with new combined abilities, there's also going to be different enemy types, because if you get more powerful, the enemies also need to match your power, otherwise it gets incredibly stale. Unfortunately, this is only half true. You do see more enemies as the game goes along, and they get more armor, and there are different enemy types, but the player gets so powerful that it becomes trivial defeating them. After a certain point, the motion controls wear off, and now you're just going through the motions, kind of waiting to beat the game. This is where I swap from trying to be objective about this game to subjective. Everything I'm going to say from here on out is just my opinion. This game honestly kind of bored me. I know that's going to make a lot of people angry because people really like this game, but as I said, if you don't care much for the Wiimote controls, it's kind of just the same thing over and over until you beat the game. And man, these wore off of me really quick. Now, I'm saying all of this with the hindsight of 2021. Unfortunately, this game was hampered by the hardware it had. As I mentioned, the motion controls sometimes just straight up don't work. You'll swing and nothing will happen and you'll get punished for it, and that's always infuriating. And no, before anyone leaves that comment, this is not a problem with my setup. This is the same setup I used for the other Wii games I covered, including Conduit 2, which also used Wii Motion Plus. I remember a lot of people giving this game credit for how good the motion controls felt, but I always heard them saying something along the lines of, "This is so much better with the Wii Motion Plus." What they were really implying was that originally the Wiimote controls were not very good, and the Wii Motion Plus made them serviceable. They're far from perfect, and that is definitely a big hindrance in my enjoyment of this game. But to be honest, in general, constantly swinging this thing around is not really very fun to me. Pointing it at a screen and aiming makes more sense for a shooter, but I'm not interested in motion controls for constantly swinging swords around. Not to mention, this control scheme does limit the depth of your game. Now, they could have made this a very one-note game and only given you just a sword to swing and nothing more with different enemy types, so at least there is some depth here. But it's never going to be quite as deep as a regular controller, with more buttons for more combos and more movement and constantly swapping guns. Basically what I'm saying is this is never going to reach the depth of something like, say, Devil May Cry, and I probably would have preferred it if it had just a regular controller. Hell, maybe even re-release this game on the Switch with regular controls. If they can make Skyward Sword work with regular controls on the Switch, then certainly they can make this game work on the Switch. Just don't release it for $60 again. Why is Skyward Sword $60, Nintendo? Master Chief Collection has every Halo game except Halo 5, and it's $40. You can't tell me that just re-releasing Skyward Sword, but in 1080 on the Switch, is worth $60. And people keep defending Nintendo for doing this shit. Nintendo sucks. Alternatively, I would love if they made a Red Steel 3, but as a VR title. Motion controls are significantly better in VR, and there's a lot more immersion with the headset. Wii controls... I mean, they did what they could do with the limited hardware they had, so I can't really complain about them, and I'm sure if you played this game back when it launched, it was an awesome experience. But I can't exactly erase the experience I had while playing Boneworks out of my head, so it becomes more frustrating than enjoyable going back to playing something like this. I at least didn't feel like I was being tortured. That's the one thing I can say. Red Steel 1 felt like torture to beat, but Red Steel 2 at worst just kind of felt monotonous and boring. But that's my personal subjective opinion, and I think the bigger part is that the game just kind of didn't really tickle my fancy. I'm more of a shooters guy, and I made the mistake of coming into this expecting a shooter, not a hack and slash. And that 100% is player fault. That's no fault of the game. The game is a fantastic, well-polished game, and I would like to see a Red Steel 3 out of pure curiosity. But I think I said everything I wanted to say about Red Steel 2. As always, a huge thanks goes to the people that joined me over on Twitch. My Twitch is twitch.tv/JarekTheGamingDragon if you want to hang out in the future. If you subscribe, you get to see my videos ahead of time. And also a big thanks goes to my sponsor, NordVPN. If you go to nordvpn.com/Jarek and use code Jarek, you will get a special deal. Thank you all for watching this video, and I'll see you next time.